Here we go. Hi guys, welcome back to the Astroimaging channel. Tonight's session is the making of an image, Josh Smith's Cat's Eye Nebula. And we knew this was a great image last week when we first saw it, but now we really know that we were onto something because it was recognized with NASA APOD. So we're all happy for Josh. Definitely a well-deserved APOD on this one. But we have a few things. First, David and Alex are coming in from RTMC, and we're going to hand it right over to them because they just wanted to say hi and give a little shout-out. Alex, right over to you.
Hey guys. Hi guys. We just wanted to say hi. We did a workshop today. David did most of the workshop today. I sat around and, acted like I was in charge and stuff.
It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
That's cool.
Out of here. We're at RTMC Astronomy Expo every Memorial Day, so we just thought we'd go live and say hey. Bye.
Nice to see you guys.
We got to go back to door prizes. Yeah. So bye-bye. We're out.
Good seeing you. All right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. As most of you probably know, David presented on processing today, or was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. Yeah, a few of us TAICers get out, so you can see us and meet up with us at various shows. Number 2 to go over with, last week's image of the week goes to Andy or MOAI. And Andy is in the room, and I was going to give him a few minutes to talk about his image, which is the IFN around Polaris. And I am going to pull that up. And Andy, I think you see it now.
Yeah, I can see it.
Great. Yeah, tell us a little bit about this image.
Okay, so this is 152-minute subs with my Takahashi FS60 and the reducer, which brings it down to f4.2, if I remember well, at 254mm focal length, and a Hughtech modified Canon 6D, which I really like. I bought it recently, and I really like that camera. And I was using my Astrophysics Mach 1, and the shots are all unguided. So I just polar aligned with the right angle polarscope and use the intervalometer to run the camera, and it just went all night. I shot from a green zone, so it's not super dark, but there's no gradients due north, or very few gradients, and I think that really helped to bring out all that faint stuff that's around Polaris. Yeah, and it's all processed and calibrated and processed in PixInsight. So it was actually, the thing is with the 6D, the data is so clean, it's very easy to process. So still dealing with some flats issues, but I think I have it figured out now. So that's about it.
Pretty cool. Yeah, I was going to ask you if you had any difficulty with polar alignment, and I guess the RAPAS just got you there, and unguided as well.
Yeah, when I first got it, I did a drift alignment, and then I adjusted the 3 set screws in the back to calibrate it, and that's about it. And it's pretty accurate. I had a Takahashi NJP before the astrophysics mount, and it seems like the right angle polarscope is just as accurate as the Takahashi polarscope. At least it seems to be. I haven't really measured, the offset, but it seems to be pretty as accurate as the NJP polarscope. So.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, the few times that I've measured my RAPAS using basically just the software measurements, I was under 1 arc minute, which surprised me. But yeah, they always say this particular target, Polaris, and shooting around Polaris is very susceptible to bad polar alignment. So I guess that proves it. You can do it. Very cool.
Yeah, and I kept the subs at 2 minutes just to minimize any drift, and also it's a short focal length, and that helps.
Yep. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for submitting this, and thanks for coming on. I'll remind everyone out there, you guys can always submit this. If you want to take a look at this image full res, just go down our page. You'll probably be able to see it. And you could like it or do whatever Google Plus has us do to it, plus it. But yeah, thanks for submitting, and remember, you guys submit your image either on Facebook or in the Image of the Week thread, or just send me your image in Google Plus, and I'll put it up for consideration. But Andy, thanks again. Okay, yeah, tonight's session. Yeah, tonight's session, Josh's Cat's Eye, and this one's gonna be fun. My emails lit up the other day, and I was wondering where they were coming from, and all of a sudden, yeah, Josh got his APOD, well deserved. So Josh, I'm gonna hand it right over to you, and you're welcome to take it away.
Thanks, Adam. Just confirm presentation's up, looking good?
We can see it.
All right, great. Okay, so Adam asked me maybe a week and a half ago to do a presentation on how how I came up with this image, and kind of wanted to go over, what went into capturing the image, what went into processing the image, and how to make it happen. And so we'll start by saying, why are we going to present on this? And it was a little bit of a challenge coming up with maybe some good subject material on it, because I want to discuss specifically what I did on this picture, but also kind of, give a template of maybe how to think about more complex images and how to prepare to take more complex images. And also, we are hoping to do something along the lines of creating this into a series. I don't know if every episode will be a full-length episode, or maybe we'll give everyone who wins an Image of the Week an opportunity to do something like a 5 or 10 minute video on how they got their image. We love having them come on live to answer any questions, but also maybe it would be a good opportunity to record some of these, so that way if somebody's really interested in an image, they can kind of look more into detail on how it was created. So, this hopefully will create something of a template of what people can describe whenever we pick their image as an Image of the Week. So without any further ado, I'll talk about what we're going to cover tonight. First is why present the making of an image. Then we'll talk about selecting your targets, probing the targets, kind of taking short captures to look what's there, framing the targets, planning the acquisition of the data, checking the data after you've actually acquired it, then processing with a purpose, especially on something kind of complex like this. You may process a lot of different kind of parts of the image independently and with a lot different idea in mind for that section of the image. Combining the data, I'm going to talk briefly about what I did on this image, but really there's a full episode worth of information there, so we'll just talk briefly about that tonight, and then maybe we'll follow up with an episode on something like HDR blending in Photoshop and/or PixInsight at some point in the near future. And then finally, just kind of talk about presenting the image. So I already mentioned some of these things of why to present the making of an image. And it's not just the things I mentioned. It's also a cool way to get great ideas from other people, whether it's how you plan things out in SGP, or whatever program you're using, or learning other programs to use. I know a lot of people use other programs for planning their data acquisition, and it's also a great way to meet people and just talk about stuff in astrophotography and just kind of learn new techniques. So it may be something like Andy was talking about just a minute ago with taking the shot of Polaris. To be honest, I would have probably never tried doing what he did unguided, because I would have thought that it would have been impossible to guide, let alone to shoot that on track. So it's kind of cool to hear that it's not so bad. Maybe an interesting technique to try for some of the targets up by the pole, unguided with a Mach 1. So anyhow, moving on. Okay, so the first part that I want to talk about is selecting a target. So we're going to kind of go in each one of these slides, we're going to kind of go general about, you know, how I'd like to kind of set up a target, and then specifically what I did on the cat's eye. So it's kind of going to be a twofold presentation. So it might be obvious selecting a target, but there's a lot of them out there. And what I mean by this is that there's probably, I don't know, there's probably 100 to 200 targets that everyone knows and they've seen over and over again. And as soon as you show it to them, they can tell you what it is. Maybe the more experienced guys can even name a longer list than that. But there's tons and tons of targets that you probably haven't seen ever. There's tons and tons of targets that maybe you haven't seen in your first few years as an imager. And then there's tons and tons of targets where you've seen them before, but maybe you haven't seen everything that that target has to offer as far as you know, maybe going deeper on it, showing a different color channel than is normally seen, or whatever you know, you might be interested in. So I've shown some examples on the right-hand side of some interesting targets that either I took what I thought was in a different way than you can normally see out there, or targets that a lot of people didn't know about. So the top one on the right is the Squid Nebula, which you know, at the time that I started that project, there was probably only a handful of amateurs who ever imaged that, and it's a lot of fun to produce a really nice picture like that and then have a lot of people get excited about it and start taking it. We've seen quite a few of them in the last couple of years, but at the time, I think I'd only seen maybe 2 or 3 LRGB images of that, so that was a fun one to go deep on. Another one, like I talked about, when you're selecting targets, you don't always see that outer blue halo of M27, the second one down on the right, and made it my goal, you know, to kind of emulate some of the best pictures I've seen of that and really figure out a way to get that you know, that really nice delicate halo to come out really well with a lot of structure without much noise. Below that was a collaboration that Adam and I did, and so another part about kind of selecting the target was we talked a lot about the different really cool parts of that region in the sky, and we both happened to be working on it, and we talked about what we really wanted to bring out. And we'll get into this later, but once we started checking the data, we noticed more stuff in that image that we didn't know about. We did some research and found out about Big Haro object in there, found a really cool blue glow that we hadn't seen a lot before, and then there was that big kind of long supernova HA shock remnant there that we really wanted to focus on getting and bringing that out as well as we've seen anywhere else. So another way, there's maybe been a lot of pictures of BDB 152, but not a lot that are shown in the same light. And then at the bottom right, one that I think I'd only seen maybe 2 or 3 examples of before was SH2308. And so that was a good example of, well, at the time I lived up north, and this is a pretty far southern target, and I never would have had an opportunity to shoot anything remotely that decent from up north. So maybe you're planning to go to a star party, like I took that at the Winter Star Party, or maybe you're planning on an astro trip down South America or something like that. Take advantage of those trips. Shoot something that's in the sky that you normally wouldn't see. Maybe Omega Centauri or Statue of Liberty Nebula. And there's plenty of great southern targets if you're down south. If you're from the south and up north, look at what might be available to you. So I always really, really have loved planetary nebula, and I think that they are just really interesting because they typically have really bright cores and really awesome structure in their bright cores, and then a lot of them actually have super faint halos and really interesting structure in their outer regions, sort of like the Owl Nebula has that, or M27, or a lot of them. And so the Cat's Eye just happens to be probably my favorite of all this planetary nebula, and part of the reason is it's really a unique structure to it, but the other part is that I thought that I hadn't seen anyone really quite do the whole image perfect justice, capturing the galaxy next to it, NGC, I believe 6552, or also showing the core and the faint outer halos, and then also there's concentric shells that I've only seen before, and maybe one amateur picture and the Hubble picture. So a good way to think about selecting the target is either targets that are less often portrayed or portrayed in a different way, and that really helps giving it the image a wow factor. I'm going to share this presentation afterwards, but I put some good resources below for helping find some targets out there, and I'm sure there's tons of other ones. If you guys want to share them on the site, I'd be happy to add them to this slide. These are just some of the ones that I've used recently. APOD's obviously a great one. I have a handful of targets in the works that I don't think I've seen amateurs shoot before. Goofy on Cloudy Nights has, this says narrowband targets, but really it's a master list of targets by narrowband and by season. He's got all kinds of stuff, and there's a lot of really good ideas in there. Neurohack is one that I've always enjoyed because it talks a little bit about the brightness of the targets and what month is good to take them in. It talks a little bit about the challenge of them and what focal length you want. And same thing goes for Jerry's book, which is in the astropix.com. That's another one that I got that's really cool. You can sort tons and tons of targets by different, I believe it's sizes, locations, brightness, channels. And then one that I've started recently playing around with a little bit more is the Deep Sky Object Browser. And this guy's just really done a wonderful job on his site. He shows kind of the path of the target. He can give you email updates on what targets are up in the sky. You can upload data there and share your pictures there. There's just all kinds of really wonderful stuff there. It's probably, right now, my new favorite website for kind of looking at what's available in the night sky. So we'll move on to the next slide. And this is talking about, once you have your target selected, probing the target. So the idea of probing the target is you don't really know what's there. You don't necessarily know how bright stuff in it is. I mean, you can do a lot of complex math, which might be interesting to you, and that's fine if it is. And you can determine the surface brightness of the image, and you can look at your sky's darkness and your CCD characteristics and your telescope speed and all that stuff, and you can say, okay, well, I can calculate that I'm going to need this much time to get this signal to noise ratio, and you can go on and on about that. If you're really planning on creating, I guess, a wow picture, it doesn't hurt to spend one night kind of just probing it, though. Look at the different channels in the target. See if there's something that you miss in other pictures. See what it's going to come out like in your telescope. So the first time that I shot this, the very first night that I shot this target, I didn't quite have a great plan in place. I developed it pretty quickly after I started, but right off the bat I didn't. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I saw some good pictures of the core and some good pictures of the outer halo. I said, oh man, I want to make this picture shine. And so I just started kind of shooting. I think the first subs I took were 5-minute luminance subs, and because I had been using those a lot at the time. So I took a 5-minute luminance sub, and you can see it on the right-hand side there. It was deep enough that you could start seeing some of the galaxy on the left coming out. This picture is too small to show, but it was not deep enough to show, excuse me, a handful of the background galaxies that I was really interested in taking. But another thing you'll see is that it was really way too deep to expose anything in the core. And I actually have a handful of other subs that I don't have shown here, where I took progressively shorter and shorter exposures from 5 minutes all the way down to 1 second to kind of determine what I needed to do to really show the full range of this image. So you see on the left of the 5-minute loom, there's a 30-minute HA sub. For somebody who hasn't shot this, they may not know the HA is responsible for the red in the image, the way that I mapped it. And it is actually very faint in this target. Not only is it faint, it's somewhat soft. There's not a lot of real crisp details unless you're talking about the very core of the image. So my first sub, I was pretty shocked to see, well, if I want this to come out well and I want to get those kind of nice highlights on the tips of those the outer halo, then I'm going to have to shoot this a lot. So I actually ended up capturing more HA data than anything, and oddly enough, it was responsible probably for less of the picture than any of the other channels, but it was important to me to make sure to get the get those red highlights and the full extent of the halo to come out very clean. So I knew after the first night of kind of probing the data that that was going to take probably the most work to really get to come out right. And then you can see left of that is the 30-minute O3 sub. I was pretty excited when I saw this first one. It's still not super bright, but you can see immediately once you get into taking longer O3 subs, there's a lot of really interesting and very cool structure in the O3 for this target. So not only is there a lot of cool and interesting O3 structure, there's a lot of really fine structure in this. So I knew that not only did I want to capture this data to make the thing clean, I wanted to get good crisp data to be able to show kind of some good details all the way close down into the core. Then finally, looking over here at the 1 second image, like I said, there ended up being a lot of different length images to make up this picture. But as you can see, I've actually ended up using 1 second loom subs. I think I used 2 second narrowband subs to make sure that I could get all the way down to the very center core and resolve that center star. Adam, are there any questions at this point, or can I keep moving forward?
There aren't any questions, but guys, remember Q&A is activated, so you guys can ask away and he'll answer them. Go ahead.
Okay, so moving on, and some of this is kind of borrowing from Alex's 5 Cs, but also how I like to think about taking these pictures. Framing the target can be just a huge, huge difference maker in kind of what an image looks like. You know, it's cool to see really deep fields on small targets and kind of understand the vastness of space. It's cool sometimes to capture something even if it doesn't fit entirely in your frame, but typically they're not going to kind of create the wow factor maybe that you're looking for in that particular image. Not every image wants to or needs to be a wow image, but if you're looking to create a wow image, I think a lot of times the framing can really make a big difference, and that goes for dusty stuff, that goes for planetary nebulas, it even goes for galaxies. So if you look on the right-hand side, I showed a couple examples of some images that I took earlier on in my imaging career, and you know, I was excited to get the gear I had, and M51 is a super bright target that you can probably take with almost any gear and get it to look recognizable, get it to show up well. But not going to create a wow image with 4-inch refractor and like a 8300 chip, unless you really play with the background and show a lot of the galaxies and stuff in the background. There's even some IFN in that region, which would be awesome. For that particular image you see up there, I didn't do any of that. All I got was a bright galaxy, but I didn't really have many in the background. I didn't have any of the IFN or anything like that. So at the time, it was a nice picture, and I was really excited about it. I think it was my first image with a mono DSLR, so it was a lot of fun, but I think it was a lot more wow to me than probably anybody else who saw it, which is great, and that's fine. And but as you progress, maybe you want to do a little more with them. Below that, you'll see the Eastern Veil. And this was kind of a rookie mistake, is that you know, I didn't really think at the time when I was taking that picture about how to frame things properly. And I think that what I did was I kind of had the camera rotated just a little bit awkwardly, so that even though the Eastern Veil should fit entirely in that field of view, I would have had to rotate the camera a little bit to get it to fit. And I just didn't do it, and so I got what was a really nice, deep HA picture of the Eastern Veil, but it's clipped off and looks maybe more like a fishing hook than getting that entire dragon head in there. And so it was disappointing. That's one that I'd like to revisit at some point, because it's just, like I said, it was something I loved the data and it looked great, but it wasn't quite centered right. So it really probably took a lot away from kind of the overall presentation. But you can see on the 3 images on the left that they're all pretty well-known targets. and really bright, but I think that moving them off center and highlighting something else in the image really can make an image stand out from maybe some other examples of that target. So you'll see the Hamburger Galaxy on the left over there. There's a nice tidal tail that I think I wasn't able to get to come out quite as deep as I wanted. There was a collaboration with my dad, and we just didn't get enough loom data to get that tidal tail to come out without really jacking up the noise. So it still came out enough that the framing of having it offset kind of really helped a lot. And if you see on the right-hand side, NGC 1333, I think most of the time that you see that picture taken, you're probably going to see it sort of in the center of the field of view. And it's an awesome target on its own, and it's got all kinds of great details. But if you go deep on it, there's a lot of other really cool stuff in that region. There's just really very textured and beautiful colored dust clouds and gas and everything else in that region. A lot of colorful stars and black space behind dust clouds. And so I decided to shoot this and really emphasize both 1333, but also kind of just like the real rich texture in the region. So again, stuff doesn't have to be on center. The cat's eye is a fun one because it is tiny. I don't know how many people have shot this before, but it is really tiny. I think the first time I shot it, I was blown away, and I almost just decided not to shoot it because even in my small field of view, I shot this, and I failed to mention this before, so maybe I'll mention it now and I'll bring it up again later. This image was shot with a QSI 690, which is one of the small but sensitive Sony chips with small pixels, and a Tech 140, and I used two mounts on this image, a Mach 1 and Orion Atlas. But even on that small field of view, I think my field of view with that scope and camera is something like 45 minutes by 35 minutes. So it's a pretty small field of view to start with, and then even in that pretty small field of view, this is still barely fills up the very center of the frame. So this is cropped down to probably maybe 30% of the full field of view that I have in my image. So there was a lot of different ways they could frame this. There's a couple other cool, interesting galaxies just off to the right of the frame. But in this case, actually, I'll call out Colin McGill. I'm not sure where else he's active, but I remember seeing his picture on Astrobin a few years back, and he shot this picture with pretty much the same frame that I have here. And as soon as I saw it, I knew, oh, that's just right. It's zoomed in close enough to show the cat's eye, and it's still close enough that you can see all the way down to the core without zooming into it. But it's out far enough to kind of leave it hanging there in space, and you can see that really cool galaxy on the left there. I think if I zoomed out any further to bring in some of the other galaxies on the right-hand side, I think everything would start looking too small. Last year when I started collecting the cat's eye, I zoomed in all the way on the cat's eye and just centered the frame around it and only shot that. And even with over 100 hours of data this year, it still just isn't quite clean enough, and it's too much of a zoom to really hold up to that kind of enlargement of the image. So again, framing the target can be a big deal, and so thought a lot about this, and once I saw Colin's image, I was really sold on it. So planning the acquisition, and for a lot of images, maybe it's pretty straightforward. If the moon's not out, then shoot LRGB. Maybe think about if the scene's good, shoot luminance. If the scene's not good, shoot RGB. But if you know you're going to really go deep on something, you're going to image it for a while. There are some programs out there. I haven't used them. Maybe somebody wants to comment on what they use other than what I'm using. And so I do use SQP for all of my acquisition now. I think when I first started this project, I might have been using Nebulosity even. But for this whole year and at the end of last year, I was using SGP. So I knew I was going to want to hit 100 hours on this one after taking a few subs and knowing where I wanted to end up. So that's a lot of data, and it's going to take a lot of nights to get there. And one thing I didn't want was for my data to be fighting itself. And what I mean by that is I didn't want to collect 20 hours of O3 that was fantastic and then try and take another 20 hours of O3 and blend in stuff that wasn't nearly as good. If you do that, you may end up actually bringing down the signal-to-noise ratio. You may end up bloating your stars. So kind of had to think about it carefully, and I came up with sort of a thorough plan after I got going on it. Because I wanted everything to be as clean as possible, I kind of came up with a hard and fast rule for this particular target where I just wasn't shooting anything but HA if the moon was out at all. I didn't care if it was a quarter moon, 30 degrees or 60 degrees across in the sky, or if it was a full moon. I wasn't willing to shoot anything if the moon was out except for HA. And I also kind of came up with a rule where I wasn't going to shoot HA unless it was at least 30 degrees away from the moon. And the reason for that is that I knew the HA was so faint that I wanted to make sure that I got really good data on it and that it was as crisp as possible. Even a 5 nanometer HA filter is going to show a little bit of a gradient and definitely going to show an increase in an ADU count if you're shooting pretty close to the moon. So, so you can see in this first one, basically what I did was I created a sequence, and I created 4 different targets in that sequence. One that I was going to use when the moon was out, one that I was going to use on nights where the moon was out for only part of the night, but then was not out for the other half of the night, and then I did one for nights on a new moon when there was no moon at all, and used that for bad seeing to collect the color, and nights of good seeing where I went out and it looked like it was really steady to collect the loom. So I'm going to just kind of scroll through these here a little bit. The plan on the half moon nights was, if possible, and the moon was not out at the time, like if it was, I guess, kind of early in the new moon cycle and the moon was going down shortly after sunset, then I would collect O3 on the second half of the night. The other way around, I think it was later in the year, where if the moon was not, I'm sorry, if the moon was coming up later, but the cat's eye was actually almost setting, then I would start off with O3 before the moon came up. And then, again, like I said, I had nights of bad seeing. If I went out and stuff was twinkling, I was fine taking the color. I've become a big believer that color data, it's nice to get enough of it to get as deep as you want. You want to make sure that you get enough color subs that you have colors in your small stars. So if you're taking really deep and lots of loom, then you want to make sure that your color can stand up to coloring those small, deep, fainter stars. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be really crisp. You can do a lot of making up for poor RGB data by having great loom data. And one of the ways to make sure that you get really great loom data is to shoot it only on nights whenever the seeing's really good. So I kind of came into this whole thing with a plan on wanting to get really crisp loom, enough RGB to match the depth of the image, and really clean O3 with no gradients in it, and some HA that was going to be really usable. So going on from that, I'll go into actually planning the acquisition, and this is kind of going to give a little bit of a spoiler. I'll pause again to see if there's any questions, Adam.
I actually don't know if you mentioned this, but what was the equipment you took this with?
Yeah, I did mention it. It was a Tech 140, and that was without a field flattener this year and with a field flattener. I'm sorry, without a field flattener last year and with one this year. For anyone who's curious, small aside is that the field flattener really helps kind of control some of the bloating in the blue channel with the Tech 140 if you're using a Sony chip, which is super sensitive in the blue channel. So that helped a lot this year. In fact, I threw out about 20 hours of RGB and loom data from last year once I added the field flattener because it was so much crisper. That was riding on a Mach 1 all of this year and an Atlas last year, up until very late in the year.
Awesome, thanks.
You got it.
Josh, what field flattener are you using with 140?
I am using the dedicated field flattener for it. It's the Tech field flattener. There's also, and I'll just follow up on that because there was another question on it. AP has their new quad TCC, which is, I believe it's like something like a 0.7 to 0.75 reduction, and that is also supposed to help a lot for correcting the blues with the Tech 140. And it also, I think, can handle a full frame. I don't want to say this wrong. It's either a full frame or at least up to an 11,002 chip. So if there's no more questions, I'll move on. So continuing on planning the acquisition. So as I kind of mentioned before, there's a huge dynamic range in this image. And to hit everything, I wanted to make sure that I went as deep as I could on every part of it. And this would go without saying that other images that have really high dynamic range, you're going to want to do the same thing. Sometimes there's galaxies with super bright cores. M42 is obviously a really great example. Another great example is if you're at a really dark site and you have a camera that doesn't have a huge full well capacity, you might need to take 15, 20, 30-minute exposures in broadband to actually beat the read noise, which is what you want to do with your broadband exposures. But taking that long of an exposure might actually clip a lot of your stars. So you might want to take 2 sets of data. You might want to take 1 set of data to get all the dust in the galaxy or whatever you're shooting, and you might want to take another set to just get the stars to make sure they're not clipping. So, you know, kind of the general idea for planning the acquisition is know what your camera and your scope are going to do together, and make sure if there's something that you want to show, like colorful stars throughout the field, that you're acquiring the data you need to do that. It's very, very challenging to get color in your stars once it's gone. If you do, it's going to look weird. So make sure that you have the data that's going to make that happen. So in that vein, I took a lot of really long exposures in narrowband. So I knew that narrowband, I was not going to get my stars from them. I threw that idea kind of out right away and decided that I want to get RGB stars for this. I also, like I said, I really wanted to make that core shine and be as crisp as possible. I struggled to get it to blend quite like I wanted to. I had a few versions that really kind of showed the more natural color of it, but I did get the crispness, which is what I wanted to end up doing. So, you know, when I was probing, I took some really short narrowband exposures as well. I think people on cloudy nights are now calling it high-speed imaging, but this was, I guess, before some of the newer fast download cameras came out. But I think at the time I called it a sort of lucky imaging, where it took tons and tons of really short frames in Loom, HA, and O3, and by short frames I mean 1 and 2 second frames. And that was really all I needed with that high number of frames there. You can see it was almost 1,500 frames of 1 and 2 second frames to get the color and the crispness that I wanted in the core. And I actually didn't realize until a little bit later on that I wanted to take data that would help me get those kind of concentric shells, and that's because I don't think that I thought it was possible until some of my longer RGB subs and longer O3 subs were starting to show just the outside of those concentric shells before it got too bright in the middle. So I ended up taking tons and tons of 30-second subs as well, because those ones seemed to be just about the right length when I was stacking them well to get the inner concentric shells that surrounded the halo. And then the 5-minute subs were kind of a compromise for me in RGB and Loom. The reason I took those was that my subs usually are actually going to be where they need to be after about 60 seconds in Loom, maybe even 30 seconds, and then about 90 seconds or 2 minutes in RGB. And by saying where they need to be, I mean that they are already sky fog limited at 30 to 60 seconds in Loom and 90 seconds to 2 minutes in RGB. The problem is you see how many subs it took at this point to do this. I don't have a total count on the whole thing, but I think I ended up with something along the lines of 2,000 subs total, and that's a lot to stack. It takes up a lot of room. I didn't mind going a little bit longer on these and essentially moving the histogram to the right a little bit because I knew a lot of the dynamic range wasn't going to come from these 5-minute subs. So instead of taking what would have been 180 5-minute red subs, I took 60 of them. I think I had planned on 75 in red, green, and blue, and ended throwing out a lot of the worst frames in there to keep that many of them. So it's a thing that I think is going to happen some with some of the newer cameras that are coming out with the lower read noise, is that you're going to be skyfog limited pretty early on, and by pretty early on I mean like that 30 to 60 seconds, and one option is to just expose longer, let that histogram move to the right some. You're not going to be able to make the full use of your dynamic range of the camera, but maybe a way to get around that is to plan on taking different lengths. And so that's what I did in this one, was the 5-minute bloom and RGB were just to kind of really get the background as clean as possible, get the stars to come out as clean as possible, and it seemed like it was long enough and short enough to make sure that I also got some of the background galaxies to come out. The long narrowband subs that were 30 minutes, honestly, I just don't think that you know when you're done until you're done on some of the fainter targets. I think it was the same deal with the Squid Nebula, taking it last year, maybe SH2308. A lot of the fainter ones, you just don't know. You don't know until you, a lot of times you don't even know until you process it how many of the subs you need. You just know you're going to need a lot. So, you're going to have to look at it and kind of decide. You can do the math all you want, but the math is often probably not going to tell the full story of when the data is going to end up where you want it. So another kind of a general pointer is check your data every night. And so this is something I did with the cat's eye on a regular basis. And I try to do on a regular basis with everything I take, even more now that I'm seeing some amateurs finding some cooler stuff. But I didn't find anything particularly cool in this picture, but I did end up finding I had a supernova, an M106, and it was announced the same day that I found out that I was imaging it that night. Long way around of saying is that I took a picture of M106 the day after the supernova was discovered, but I guess the day before it was announced, and so I was super excited blinking through that data. I saw something getting big and bright, and while I was in the process of seeing if I discovered it, I found out that it was already discovered, but it was still plenty thrilling to find out I got it the second night after it actually was visible on Earth, so that was really fun. Asteroids are common. You're going to see a lot of asteroids in your pictures, and maybe you're not discovering new ones, but it's still pretty cool to see them. And not only to see them, but there's lots of resources actually to do fun stuff with asteroids. You can actually determine the asteroid's orbit with enough data, and so started a thread on Cloudy Nights about using your data, your plate solved frames, and the time that you took them to determine the orbit of the asteroid. And then, the reason I got into all this is because I'm in love with physics, and orbital mechanics is super fascinating to me. And so one of the projects I've been having fun with in the last couple of months is actually kind of going through all of my pictures from the past and finding different asteroids, and maybe making a map of the asteroids that I've imaged and kind of plotting their orbits. Would be kind of a fun exercise. We had on a presentation, I think was it last week, about exoplanet transits. Save that data, go back and look at it. It seems like there's probably going to be a lot that you can do to manually go back and look at your data and see if you can plot an exoplanet. Maybe discover one sometime. Seems like probably a far cry, but it's certainly possible, and people have done it before. And if not, you can still kind of add to the scientific community by helping narrow in the information on exoplanets. So there's a lot more than just pretty pictures in here, and there's a lot more that you can kind of see by checking through your data. I think it's something maybe usually people for a long time are so excited to process and make a pretty picture, maybe they forget some of the cool stuff and reasons that they got into it, and there's a lot to see in there. Take your time when you're done capturing your data and really explore it and look what's in there. There's a lot going on in a lot of different pictures. So I use Blink on PixInsight. It's under image inspection. It's a really powerful tool. I know when I was using CCD Stack, there was a cool tool for looking through them. Again, somebody can share if they have other tools that they like to use, but there's some really great ones that basically play a movie of your frames for you if you have them organized in the right order. Adam, any questions, or can I keep going forward?
There aren't. Keep going.
Okay. So we've gotten into talking more about processing on our forums and amongst ourselves a lot, and we have for a long time too. But I think sometimes people get really excited about the gear, the technical aspects, and all the equipment and stuff, and about how to acquire the best data, which is an important part. I mean, it took up almost half this presentation. But processing it is equally important, and I would argue way more important. I would think that, I guess the statement I would make is that a great astrophotographer can probably make most data look pretty good, even if it doesn't come out looking very good. I don't think a very poor astrophotographer can make Hubble data look very good. So certainly if you want to make great pictures or pretty pictures, then spend as much time, if not a lot more time, learning about processing than acquiring data. And we've had quite a few discussions on this about whether you have a style that you like, or if you have your own style, or somebody out there has a style you like. There's a lot of ways to kind of think about how you want your image to appear when it's done. Some people like really subtle colors. Some people like really bold and bright colors. Some people like, somewhere in between. Some people it's important to have the correct colors in the stars and the correct colors in the galaxy, or what have you. And so if you're going to process that way, then think about using G2V calibration, something like Excalibrator, to make sure that your stars are actually the right color based on their altitude in the sky. And then, with everything in processing, there's just such a subjective part to it. To some people, they don't like seeing any noise in an image at all. They want to blast all the noise away with a noise reduction routine. Some people, they don't want to use any noise reduction at all. And if you're not going to use any noise reduction at all, you probably need to have a lot of data and a really good set of data. And so, I guess without rambling too much about it, I think it's important to kind of think about how you like your images to look and kind of have an end goal in mind. And so that was really important with me on this picture. And I think that typically I have a picture of what I want my picture to end up looking like before I even take it, let alone before I take it, but also before I process it, especially when I have an idea of what the data looks like. And I think that I know where I want it to end up. And depending on the quality of the data, sometimes it gets there pretty quick. Sometimes it takes a lot of effort to get there. So, you have to kind of think about what you're going to do to make it get there. And sometimes you have to stop and just collect more data to actually get it there. Another thing that I'll mention is if you're going for a long project like this, or maybe one that's just 50 hours, maybe one that's 30 hours, or maybe even your personal best is going to be 6 hours. I mean, I think we all started there with our first, pictures probably being a couple of 2-minute subs of N51 with a DSLR. And that was super exciting, and that was great. And I think a lot of us, as we kind of move on in our imaging careers, probably go to longer and longer integration lengths because we want better and better looking pictures. But so if you're taking data across multiple nights, take time to practice processing it. There's a lot of benefits to it. One is practice processing is great for you. You're going to learn more and more skills and techniques. You're going to learn how to deal with different issues. Maybe it's out around stars. Maybe it's nasty noise. Maybe it's gradients in the sky or whatever it is. But if you really want your picture to end up being the best too, you also learn the data in your picture. And so as an example, as I was collecting the data on this image, there was interesting development in my O3 channel of kind of what looked like rays coming out of it over time. And I didn't believe it at first, and I thought maybe it was just an artifact of a couple subs. And then as I got more and more data stacked, those rays actually started looking cleaner and cleaner. And for maybe a short while, halfway through collecting the data, I thought, oh man, maybe there's something there. Maybe there's a kind of undiscovered structure because I'd gone so deep on it. And then by the time I finished collecting it, found out that man, those rays were way too big to actually really be a structure. And you wouldn't believe it, but David Alt helped me process the O3 whenever I found that I was just having an impossible time getting the background extracted on it. It was just a really nasty background. So kind of as I was wrapping up my collection on it and getting ready to process it all together, I had gone at that probably 10 different times, and I never really was super thrilled with where it ended up. The gradient was bad in it because it's O3 data and bad light pollution. You're probably going to have a bad gradient in O3 data, but you usually know how to deal with just a flat gradient. But there was also that kind of, like I said, the weird rays coming out of the cat's eye in it, and learning how to deal with that before kind of getting the processing together really helped a lot. As I was processing it, I also noticed that some of the small stars, even though I'm probably a little bit oversampled for the seeing a lot of the times, it got deep enough that some of the small stars were looking a tiny bit blocky. And I decided that I really needed to drizzle stack it to get the image to end up where I wanted, especially when it was zoomed in and kind of presented at full scale. I knew I was going to want to end up drizzle stacking it. The other thing is you also learn whether your exposures are fine or not, and you learn whether or not it's deep enough to make you happy. Like I said, I think I got 38 hours on it last year, maybe 40 hours, and I was excited about where it was going, but I knew I needed a lot more. So I think I stopped every 2 or 3 nights and processed it again, just to kind of see where it was. So the other half of processing with a purpose, I think, is taking those data sets and really focusing on what you want to get out of them. And don't worry about the rest of the frame. So I think a lot of times people worry maybe about their narrowband stars a lot when they're trying to bring out the nebula to look as good and clean as possible. You know, everyone has their own techniques to make it as awesome as possible. My technique when I do that is really just to either completely get rid of the stars, which is what I highly recommend, or just to forget about them. Figure, well, this image I'm going to focus on the dust, I'm going to focus on the nebula, and I'm going to make the stars, I'm going to make them awesome on a different processing run. If you use really great masks, you can blend stuff together pretty well. You can get it to come in really well. Enough of what we do here is really artistic that maybe some people think it's cheating to bring in color stars in a narrowband. I think unless you're doing really actual scientific work, I don't think it's cheating. I think being honest about what you do, about maybe some of the routines that you run or processes that you run, or even some of the tools you use for sharpening, noise reduction, or whether or not you're tone mapping stuff, I think being honest about it is fine, but I don't think that you need to do anything where you're restraining yourself from being skillful or artistic in your processing. So to that point, when I was processing the core, I had, like I said, I think I had something like 1,500 short images to get the core resolution to come out the way I wanted to. And I had to drizzle stack all of those 2 times drizzle stack. So that was a lot of huge files to make that happen. And I think the first time I tried to run it, when I was halfway through getting those, I had something like 500 of them, and I think it might have taken 4 or 5 hours to stack all those 2-time drizzle stack ones. So I learned pretty quickly that didn't make sense, and I wasn't going to have fun doing that. And, really, this is all about having fun. So for that part, go down and stack just a region of interest. And because this core is so tiny, I don't remember exactly what it is. I think it might be something like 12 seconds across the whole core. I cropped down a region of interest to the point where it was so small that I had enough stars to get in alignment, and that's all I needed. And that made stuff way, way faster. And so when I processed that area, I just completely blocked out the background for a couple of reasons. One is that I knew that I only cared about the core, so I wasn't worried about the stars or the background at all. And the background was noisy as heck, and it didn't look good, so it wasn't going to get in there. So I just blocked it out. The other reason was sometimes if you are really focused on processing a certain part of the data with a real purpose, and you black everything else out, it can actually make it a lot easier to blend. And so, there's a lot of different techniques for blending, but one of the ones that I really like to use is to literally, you can make a mask or paint a mask, and if there's a certain part of an image that you're really focusing on and you want it to get it to blend in right, literally block out the rest of the image completely. Not only is it good for blending it in later, but it helps you really focus on that one part. So, this little core here, it was challenging to get that structure to come out right, and it may not look great on this screen. I'm not sure. If you open the picture and look at it full size, you can see there's really a lot of good texture in it. There's kind of a double layer of the core where the structure shows both kind of the background 8 that's a little fainter and also kind of the inner core, which is cool, along with the star in the very middle. So, really just kind of focusing on that helped a lot. The next part, this was a luminance, I think it was a synthetic luminance where I combined all the 30-second subs and the long narrowband subs and all the 5-minute looms. And this was to get the full range of those concentric shells, which I said I was really excited about. I didn't think I'd seen in many other amateur images. I think part of the problem is with this particular target, it's really tiny, so you need a long focal length and an image scale of high resolution to get it to come out to actually see this stuff. But most people who use high focal lengths are using something like an RC or an SCT that has an obstruction, and it really wreaks havoc on the core in these images. I think with an RC, I think you're dead in the water. I don't see a way that you get this core to come out right with an RC because of the central obstruction. The cat's eye is literally so bright that you're just going to get a giant kind of spike in the middle. You might be able to get kind of some of the nice details really down in the very core of it, but those concentric shells are going to be tough to ever get right unless you're a masking wizard. It's certainly beyond what I could do. And I've seen and taken some data with an RC from this core because I thought it would be exciting to get it, but I decided it wasn't worth the effort. So again, you can see in this one, I sort of just destroyed all the data that wasn't in those concentric shells. Kind of, if you zoomed out on this picture a little bit, you can see that I stacked a region of interest for this also, and I also just blacked out the background entirely and focused on these concentric shells. That was all that mattered. You can see that the core in this one's completely blown out. I didn't care because it wasn't what I was aiming for, and so I just made sure that it didn't grow out into the shells. But other than that, I didn't care how bright that got. I didn't care how noisy the tendrils in the background were. It was all about just getting this kind of inner halo to come out just right. And then this one is not the best picture to show, but just because I didn't have it on hand right at the minute I was making this, was the outer halos, and just really working on getting the most to come out of the outer halo. And you can see just how much intense structure is in. I think this was my super loom where I combined the HA and the loom and the O3 and maxed them all to make sure that I was getting every bit of structure from every channel in there to show all the different details in there. So for this one, it's a little out of control, but you can see that I didn't care if the stars bloated, I didn't care if the background got noisy. I just wanted something that showed the full extent of it, something that I could mask into the image, even if it was a really small opacity, just to show the very faintest regions of the image. And again, so this is all just kind of points to processing with a purpose. Like I said, if you're going after a complex image that has a lot of dynamic range, or it has a lot of different sections in it, then split it up into 2 images, 3 images, 5, maybe 6 or 7. I think with this one I ended up with 7 or 8 different images that I put together. Maybe you're going after a galaxy that has a faint tidal stream. With that one, process one picture all the way through just to get the core just right. Process another one to get the tidal stream just right, and process another one to get the stars in the background to come out the way you want it. It's fine to do that and then combine them all at the end. And you can really get the most out of each part of the image by doing that, especially with good data. And so, as you can see, we don't have a lot of time left tonight, so I think once you do all that processing of the separate parts, the most challenging part is to get them to blend together. The cat's eye core, I've read in some places, is 10,000 times brighter than the faintest parts of its outer halo. And the concentric shells in the middle are somewhere in between. There's also issues of you have 2 narrowband channels that aren't necessarily in coordinating to a visible light that we see, and you somehow need to get that to blend in, especially if you want a natural look in your image to your RGB data. If you're taking data that you know is not going to be on the best nights, how do you make sure it's all crisp across the board, and the small stuff and the big stuff and in the stars and in the galaxies? So I'll call that a teaser before moving on to the next frame, and say that we'll probably do another episode on HDR blending, and not just HDR blending, but also blending of bloom and RGB to narrowband, and blending of stars into fainter regions and stuff like that. We did do one presentation on that a while ago, and there's a link below. So Adam, I'm almost going to wrap up here. I'm going to move on to presenting the image. Are there any other questions before moving on to that?
I haven't seen any new questions, but now's your chance, guys. Go ahead, Josh.
Okay. So once you get your image, presenting it is awesome. It's another really artistic part of astrophotography where you can do a lot of different things to make it stand out. You can make it your own, and we're taking pictures of the same things most of the time. I hit a little bit earlier in the presentation about selecting your targets to be unique, but there's not enough targets up there with to make every image unique that are really bright without putting a ton of effort in. So sometimes you're going to take ones that aren't so unique, but there's ways to make them your own. For quite a while there, I really enjoyed framing my pictures and putting a nice title on them with some data in them. And I think a lot of guys do that, and it's a cool way to kind of show what you captured and how you captured it, and take some credit for it. Sometimes, and some people like the data just to really stand on its own, just be a crisp picture on its own. I go back and forth on this. I think some people present in both ways whenever they share a picture, which I also like a lot. There's also, kind of your final image. There's lots of different ways to present that too, whether it's in a unique color palette or with and without stars. I think that if anyone who follows us a lot, they know that at least I, and I think Adam particularly, likes starless images and love dust. I love, not just dust, but also emission nebula that really highlight the structure of them and show them as kind of a starless object just hanging in space, and kind of the, I don't know if you would call it maybe the skeleton of what's going on, but there's a lot of cool ways to really, not only you could put something in a starless format, but show it in a different palette that's normally seen, and it, just that little bit that is maybe off kilter a little bit from how everyone else presented. It might be that little bit that just gives it a super wow factor that gets it to a picture that everyone's excited about. It might be something that you'd be excited to call your own, that kind of stands out from everybody else's. We've talked a lot about Bill Snyder's website and how really useful it is here. And the reason his website is so useful is when you're planning on an image, if he's taken it, he's got examples of the data from each channel in there. And it's something that I aspire to do, is be as helpful as him with that. And I hope more people learn to do that. And it takes not really a ton of extra work. Maybe just show your data at the beginning of processing, or show it at the end of processing. But split it up into its different channels and say, hey, this is what I got. This is how long it took to get this data. This is the gear I used to get this data. And it'll really help, because I think a lot of times, until you are really experienced in this hobby, and even then, you just don't know how much work's going to go into getting a picture. For this particular picture, I didn't really quite know how much was going to go into it. I don't know if it was stated here, but it ended up being 130 hours of data and 2 years of collection to get it to where I wanted it on this one. There's other pictures sometimes where I think it's going to take me 6 months to get it, and it takes me 2 nights because it's just a lot brighter. And a lot of the reason is that you just don't see maybe enough information on what it takes, and you don't see enough raw data to see what it looks like when it's stacked. So a cool way to present the image is maybe share your different channels, and there's different ways to share your different channels. Not only can you show the red, green, and blue channel on their own, and the AHA and the O3 on their own, you can show the different structural parts on their own. And this one, was fun because there was a lot of different stuff to kind of share separately, and we just talked about some of those different parts of the image to process separately. So this is kind of maybe a poster board that shows all the acquisition for each channel, how many subs and how long they were in each channel, what filters were used. Another way to kind of show the same set of data is to use a GIF or GIF. And that one's nice for a place like maybe Astrobin, because you can show it a lot larger, and people can see everything a little bit larger. And everyone likes stuff that moves and kind of flips through, so it's kind of a cool way to show something that's a little more, I don't want to say interactive, but it draws your attention. It draws the viewer's attention. And again, it's useful. It's all about community in this hobby, and getting people involved and excited about stuff. And so if you can share some useful information that inspires somebody else to do something, or gets them excited about taking a picture, or helps them, then it's great. So that's one thing that I wish was almost, I don't want to say mandatory, but I wish was more celebrated across the community, is kind of a more thorough breakdown of what it takes to get the image that you present. And I think whether you're doing it with 30-second DSLR subs on a fixed tripod, or with Hubble data, I think it's great either way, and it's going to help somebody out. There's people who are from all walks of life in this hobby and interested in all different things, and anybody who's advanced in one section is a complete beginner in another. Just getting into learning how to shoot lightning with my DSLR and hoping to do some cool composite images, but I have no idea what I'm doing. Complete beginner there, even if I've had a little more experience in deep sky object imaging. So just a cool way, and I'm sure there's lots of other cool ways, and love to see how else other people present their images. I've seen a couple of really cool collages of deep sky objects, where they're all presented at scale with each other, so you can get an idea of what the different sizes of galaxies and stuff are next to each other. And the next thing is share and discuss your pictures. Again, it's a community, and it's a lot of fun to be involved, and it's a lot of fun to get feedback on your image, and that's how you learn how to make it better. Obviously the Astro Imaging channel, I think Adam and I and David and Alex and Eric and anybody who's been here, and now Tolga too, who's been here for a long time, I think that we all probably think this has been by far our most valuable resource in astrophotography. It's just been an absolute blast. We've met so many really cool people. We've learned so many tricks across the board, from acquisition to processing, about gear, new things that we'd never heard of before, awesome software. So if you want to get to be a better imager, you want your stuff to come out looking better, if you have questions about how to make it look better, share them, whether it's on Cloudy Nights or Astrobin or here on the Astro Imaging channel. If you're sharing an image, it doesn't have to be something that you think is going to win Image of the Week. It could be that you have you have a picture that you're working on and you're struggling with, and you have a question, share it here, share it anywhere, and get feedback, and be open to it. I think everybody, or most people in this hobby, are in it because they love it and they love hanging out with people and chatting about it, and and talking about it. And so definitely encourage you to do that here and everywhere else. And every once in a while you get lucky, and other people will be really excited about your picture. I was fortunate enough that Jerry picked this picture as the A-pod, and that came out yesterday, which was fancy and nice timing for our show tonight. I'll say that it was an honor to have the image selected as an A-pod, but what was particularly cool about it was the amount of people that I heard from yesterday and got to have conversations with was just really cool. And just from former presenters here, people that saw it on Facebook that I went to school with a long time ago, and people in the astronomy community that I've always aspired to have my images look more like, and and respect greatly, reached out with some nice emails, and so it's any awards or anything that you can do sometimes to generate more conversation about your image. It's not about winning the award. It's about the more conversations you get, the more exposure you get to your images, the more people you're going to meet, the more kind of networking you're going to get to do, and networking in a fun way. And the better you're going to get. I mean, the more people that you know to learn from, and the more people that know your pictures and know you, the more interaction you're going to have in it, and it makes it more fun when you go to star parties or RTMC or out to NEAF or MEAC or something like that. I mean, all of those are just really a lot of fun, and it's even more cool when you're meeting people out there that you already know. So I think that's about what I have for tonight. I'm going to wrap it up there, Adam, and see if there's any more questions. But thanks for asking me to present on this, and hopefully it'll help out with some other people who are planning on some more complex images, and if not that, hopefully people enjoyed it and look forward to maybe some other people kind of presenting on their pictures.
Thank you, Josh. Again, congratulations on the image. I hope you didn't hit your head on the ceiling when you found out.
I was excited. It was fun.
Yeah, that's. I think we all aspire to do that. And I have to admit, I think I showed your image to more people than I probably show my own images to when I saw that. So
it was cool. I think my family was more excited than I was. It was nice seeing them all light up too. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's cool that NASA recognizes amateurs. I'm in that same class of people. When I see a Hubble image on APOD, I'm a little bit disappointed. And I say, well, yeah, but it's Hubble. I mean, it's a great image, but it's Hubble. When they recognize amateurs, it's pretty cool. And the other thing is,
I was going to say, it is very cool, and it's interesting reading some of the. I got tagged in a lot of the comments on Facebook and stuff for it, and it's interesting seeing what people's ideas about where all these pictures come from, and some people were commenting about, oh man, I wish I had a telescope out in space to take that picture too, and I was like, no, it was taken from my driveway in Florida under all this light pollution, and it's cool hearing people be like, oh, you can really do that? Really? It's like, yeah, you should do it. Get your scope out. It'd be a lot of fun. You can make an awesome picture too. So,
yeah, the one question, have I ever gotten an APOD? And no, I haven't. I am not a member of that club yet. I aspire to be. But one of the cool things about it is I just happened to have my astronomy calendar for this year, and that's the Hubble cat's eye for May, right?
Oh, how perfect.
Yeah, and I've been staring at this for the month, and the funny thing is Hubble can't capture an image like what you took.
No, I don't remember what their wide field camera is. It's pretty wide, but I don't think it's quite as wide. I don't remember actually. I want to say they have one that's like 2 minutes by 2 minutes wide or something.
Right, but it's probably being occupied by more scientific data. I think they do the long focal length and take those really amazing planetary nebula photos and interacting galaxies, ARP galaxy photos. But the amateurs, we really put out a lot of good photos, and I think Josh's photo. I'm so glad we decided to kind of launch this type of programming right before that happened. Like that was just kind of the perfect way it could work out.
Yeah, I did find out a couple days ago, but I was going to hold on to it to make sure that it happened because it was set as a tentative date. So that was exciting and really cool timing for the show. And like you mentioned, really excited to hopefully have more people do this. I mean, some of the images that are submitted here are just stunning, and kind of like with Andy tonight, I had a lot of questions about what he did to take it. When I first saw that, I was like, holy smokes! I think I've seen maybe one or two images of the IFN around Polaris before. So I'm hoping maybe we can do something like offer that opportunity to anybody who wins, and maybe we can just do a quick Google Hangout, and they can do a presentation that we can record and post with a picture.
Yes.
That gives a little more information on it. So again, hopefully that's maybe a good template of the kind of stuff. It doesn't have to be an hour long. Even a 5 or 10 minute presentation on how you acquired it, what your intentions were with it, what your data looked like.
Yeah, I agree. We do the image of the week to kind of recognize photos, but there are some photos that we just even today's Andy's was just kind of a shockingly good photo. And I see a bunch of comments coming in. First of all, you're getting some congrats, but let's start at the bottom. Larry wants to know where you can get the T-shirts. Larry, send me a message, and I'll get you Josh's email if you don't already have Josh's email. Or if you're on Cloudy Nights, you can PM Josh. Josh has the T-shirts, and he can hook you up with one. Osiris, yeah, check it out. If you go back to you can see the whole entire show on YouTube. And Osiris is also saying he'd love to see more of your processing in Photoshop. And Josh has done prior Hangouts where he went more in depth with processing. The interesting thing that'll stem out of this, I think, is some of the HDR processing, which
I linked a old presentation, but that one was old. It's funny. We've talked about this. I think it's probably relevant on there. If anyone has any requests for episodes for us to do, or they want to share their own, we'd love to have you you come on and share it. But if you have any requests from us for a topic, then let us know. By all means, we're always looking for episodes. So if there's a particular part of processing that we can help with, we'll definitely do an episode on it. The other point I was going to get at, and Adam and David and I were talking about this, is that we did a lot of presentations, and I think we've been doing this for 2 years now. So in almost 2 years, I was looking at it. I think our anniversary is coming up, but I think we've learned quite a bit, and so a lot of those presentations can probably use an update. And one of those is the HDR processing one. I was looking at that. I think I did that on M42, and it was one of the first ones I did. So.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm really looking to an HDR processing tutorial that's not on M42. This image in particular, everyone does the HDR processing on M42, but this image in particular is like M42 on steroids.
Yeah, this was particularly challenging, and just because there is it wasn't such a gradient of super bright to super dark. I mean, there was some real sharp steps in there, and sometimes those sharp steps are even more challenging to deal with.
Yeah, and the ability to pull out different structure in the different channels, whether it be RGB or narrowband.
Yeah.
Just when you're really pushing it, when you're trying to pull out that new stuff, you're looking for stuff that you haven't seen before. There's stuff there, but just because it's there doesn't mean your processing is going to be conducive to pulling it out. So I think you kind of said that well earlier in the different, for example, the expanding shells coming out of it. Yeah, Osiris is saying he's seen them all, but he's greedy and wants more. So we're going to keep trying. Yeah, and he's saying totally agree. Any HDR on not M42 would be awesome.
Or M31, I guess.
Or M31, yeah. It's always the same couple, but yeah, this really shows what it is. And I've got to ask. So I was doing some off-the-cuff math. I don't know what, 12 to 15 gigabytes without the calibration files. Is that about what you were at? then you stacked them, so you probably quadrupled that.
Well, I think it came out actually. I don't think it was. I think it was something like 14 gigabytes without the calibration files. With them, because the only reason I know this is because I've started. The way that I do my processing now is I have a separate thumb drive for every single picture that I take. And so I bought a big stack of 16 gigabyte thumb drives because I thought for most pictures that's probably good. For this one, 16 gigabytes barely fit the raw data on it, which I was nervous about losing this data. So I ended up buying the 32 gigabyte one, which took the calibrated data. And then I was like, oh wait, no, I got to stack all these. I ended up having to buy a separate solid-state drive, external hard drive for this that ended up being a 500 gigabyte one, and all the processing and stuff, it filled up 85% of that. So I've got about 450 gigabytes on this right now.
That was my next question. Are you good? Are you backed up well? And did you have to buy a new hard drive for it?
Yeah, for one particular picture I did. Yeah, so it's one that I've tried to back up in 2 places now.
Yep. And you got another thank you for the show coming in from someone that was just at RTMC watching David. So, pretty cool.
Holy smokes. Two TAIC presentations in a weekend for that person.
Yeah, yeah. Yep. And more to come. Yeah, next week is actually going to be a cool episode. Tolga, who's in the room now, is going to present on his OTA mounted PC. And I always say, oh, it's good to bring a laptop out with you, but technology is getting better. And with lightweight micro PCs, you could have them mounted right on the OTA. You limit the number of cables you have to run. And with, I mean, I'll let him present on this, but with various remote desktop programs, you really don't need that laptop out there. You can even run it from bed and have all the benefits and even some more with having it out sitting on the mount.
It's not oddball, super advanced guys only doing it now either. It's becoming common. It's accessible, and people are very successfully doing it. So I'm very excited to see that one.
Yeah, and they're getting smaller and smaller. Tolga has I spoke with Tolga a while about his particular setup. But, you know, they have these stick drives now that are full computers, and there might be some quirks with them. I don't think the technology. Well, the people who are experimenting with them are learning the quirks with them. But the micro PCs that are about that big, still lightweight, are just as powerful as the laptops. And some of them even have serial ports on them, which Tolga pointed out to me. I think that was cool. And I just saw one, I don't know, I got emailed this morning, Memorial Day sale, $99. It's like hard to say no at that price. Yeah, so thanks again, Josh.
Thank you.
And again, congratulations. Wait. Okay. Can't you reuse some of the calibration to save space, like the dark bias, if you have a dark library? Yes, but when you're doing when you're using PixInsight, you get your registered files, you get your calibrated files, you get your registered files. But also, if you're using flats and you have that many filters, it adds up.
I have 37 separate sets of flats because I took this over, I think, 60-some nights. The other thing that's funny is over 2 years, you change a lot of things you do. Somehow I was lucky enough to come back to the same gear. I started this project, and I had a Tech 140, and for a while in the middle of it I didn't. And I was disappointed and thought I wasn't going to get to finish it, but then I ended up getting one again. So changed processing programs, computers, operating systems, jobs, states, and decades I lived in, I think, all in the last 2 years. A lot of things change over that in master photography.
I have to say, though, your images since your move are making me jealous. I think, I don't know, I think the Florida skies are giving you a nice advantage over the old Pittsburgh skies.
Yeah, they hold up to the higher focal length better, for sure.
Yep. Yeah, pretty much all of your recent images are pretty amazing. All right. Well, yeah, I'm glad you guys all came. Happy Memorial Day weekend. Like I said, next week Tolga's going to be on, and I guess that's it for now. I'll go one more scan, make sure I'm not missing anything. You guys follow the Night Skies Network. I have been on the Night Skies Network in the past, and I think it was down for a little bit, and then it went back up. I haven't been on since. I think it went back up with have they completed their new website design? But I was actually trying to have the new owner on, and I forgot about that. I'm gonna have to give him a buzz and see if he's interested in presenting. And since I missed that, I'm gonna make sure I didn't miss any others. Nope, I think that's it. All right, guys, thanks again for coming, and we'll see you next week. Yeah, give me or Josh an email or message us on Google if you want T-shirts, and yeah, we'll see you around. Thanks again for coming.